What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is my latest catch-up video. This is where I talk about all the movies that I saw in said month. In this case, July of 2023. It's all the 2023 films that I saw in said month. This will, of course, be spoiler-free. I will not be talking about these movies in depth. In fact, I'll be talking about them very briefly, giving you guys my rating, and then talking about the next movie. And I'll be going from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. If you want my full in-depth thoughts on these movies, because you can check out my reviews on Letterboxd, where I usually do write in-depth reviews. So I'll put the link down below for that. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off, the beginning of July, I saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which was one of my most anticipated movies of 2023. I am a huge Indiana Jones fan. I loved the first three. The fourth one I felt very mixed about. But I will say this, that mixed bag nature of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I actually appreciate much more after watching Dial of Destiny, because I was very disappointed by this movie. I don't want to talk too much about it because it is something that was kind of saddening. But I felt very hollow while watching this. I felt the runtime, the digitally shot movie nature of this was also something that took me out of it versus, the other movies being shot on film. The ending just really wasn't satisfying in the slightest. Humor didn't work. Action scenes really weren't exciting and very forgettable too, I might add. Just an overall very disappointing movie. And I actually was on a podcast recently where I did talk, about this movie. So I'll put the link down below for that. But guys, yeah, I was disappointed. I know I'm in the minority because I have seen a lot of people love this movie. And I can respect that. But for me, yeah, I'm not picking this up on Blu-ray or 4K. And I don't think I'll ever watch this again. I did not like it. And that's why Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny, I personally will be giving a... And next up, I saw Past Lives, which is a movie that is very much so character and dialogue driven. And I gotta say, from both perspectives, this movie works quite well. It is a simple but effective movie, and how the growing of time, the ripple effect of such, has a lot of effect on these characters. And it's really good. I don't have too much to say about this movie because it's one of those things where I think that viewers just need to go into it knowing as little as possible. I know that was the case for me. It's one of the best reviewed movies of the year, and I can definitely see why. But I will say this, despite it being quite a good film, it's probably not even going to make my honorable mentions for the end of this year. Who knows, maybe on rewatch I'll love it even more. But for now, I think it's good, but I didn't love it the way many others do. But still, Past Lives, it is good, and I definitely would recommend it. And that's why Past Lives, I will be giving a... And next up, we have The Lesson, which is a solid film. I liked it quite a bit, and I think that it gets better, as, each act progresses. And I think that by the end, I was smiling because I thought that it did a good job in terms of the structure of this film, but it's also a very well-acted film. Really well shot, too. It's just film that, unfortunately, when I saw it, there was, only a couple people that were in the theater with me, and it was only at my local theater for, a week. So I hope that more and more people come across this film because it definitely is worth your time. Didn't love it, but I do think it is solid, and I think it's very much so worth your time, especially if you like mystery films. And, yeah, that's why for me, The Lesson, I personally will be giving a... And next up, we have the Super Mario Brothers movie. So this was a movie I did not see in theaters. I actually waited to get the Blu-ray out at my local library. And I'm so glad that that was the case because this is what I like to call a treadmill movie, where you watch it as you're on the treadmill. Because I felt nothing while watching this movie. It is the definition of cash grab. They should have just called this the super cash grab movie, because I felt nothing watching this. I felt absolutely nothing. And yeah, I know I didn't play any of the video games and whatnot, but still, I feel like a movie should work at the very least as a movie, but it doesn't. This is a movie that has so many references to the game, it's very obvious. And that's just it. It's a very obvious cash grab of a movie. I can see why kids might like this, and also people that grew up playing the video games. But besides that, man, I did not like this movie. And that's why, for me, I'll personally be giving the Super Mario Brothers, or the Super Cash Grab movie, a... And next up, we have Insidious, The Red Door. So, I've seen all the Insidious movies, and of them, I only liked the first one. I actually own it on Blu ray. I think it's quite a good movie. It is very, very effective, especially as a horror film. And every entry after that, I just have not liked at all. And I will say that The Red Door does have some things going for it. I do think that Patrick Wilson's directing is quite strong, and I do think that with what he utilizes with the camera, like the cinematography in particular, is just quite good. I liked it. I liked the look of this film despite it being very digital, as opposed to the first one, being shot on film. But still, I liked overall what he did. Like how, for example, there's one scene where someone's in the background and they slowly are coming up. Stuff like that I think is really effective in terms of psychological horror. And yeah, I'm glad that Patrick Wilson did that. What I will say is this. This movie definitely, especially in the third act, feels like a retread of the first entry. And that's just it. By the time the third act rolled around, I went from saying, wow, this is something that I really like to something I was kind of like, eh. I felt very mixed about this movie. I really did. I thought that the third act really wasn't able to tie together as to why this movie was needed. Because honestly, I'm just gonna say it. I feel like this series should have just been a one off. But I will say that of the sequels, I will say this is the most entertaining, and for that, it's why I'll give it a higher rating than the other entries, and it's why Insidious: The Red Door, I'll be giving a. And next up, we have Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. This was another film that I was greatly anticipating, very much so, because I felt like Fallout. First of all, let's go back. This is a franchise that it seems with each entry gets better and better. And Fallout, I said to myself, this is a really good action film. How are they going to top it? And I gotta say, I don't know necessarily if this film topped it. I'm still trying to figure out which I like better. I'll let you know on rewatch of Dead Reckoning Part 1. But as it stands, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is a blast. I had a lot of fun with the humor. I loved, loved, loved the action scenes. I loved how this film was really long, but honestly, I never felt the length. And what's also nice is that this film gets better and better as each minute progresses. I will say the first 10 minutes or so, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to like this movie. But after that, like I said, it got better and better. And by the end, I was sold. And I also appreciated that, similar to Across the Spider-Verse, this might be a hot take because I know some people would feel differently about Across the Spider-Verse. But similar to Across the Spider-Verse, I like how this is a movie that, yes, is a part one, but it also stands on its own. Like, if Dead Reckoning Part 2 for some reason is not good, I can still say to myself, you know what? I can own Dead Reckoning Part 1 and I could watch it as itself and it works quite well. And similar to Across the Spider-Verse. So that's something that I like about this and I really appreciate it about it because I feel like a lot of times with other movies, that's not really the case. So props to the Mission Impossible series. And again, this is a franchise that seems to be getting better with each entry, and I'm all here for it. So for me, Dead Reckoning Part 1, I personally will be giving a. And next up, we have another film that I was greatly anticipating this year, and that is Barbie. So Barbie is a film directed by Greta Gerwig, and I absolutely loved Lady Bird. I saw Lady Bird, I think it was like 3 times in theaters. Really, really liked that film. I own it on Blu-ray. Little Women, I saw once in theaters, bought it on Blu-ray, watched it with my wife. Didn't really like it as much on the second viewing, and actually sold the Blu-ray. So she is technically, I would say, 1 for 2. But after watching this film, she's now 2 for 3 in my book. And yeah, I really liked this film. I thought this film was very entertaining and similar to Dead Reckoning Part 1, honestly. It seemed to get better and better with each passing minute. I was kind of on the fence with this film in the first 10 minutes, but again, once they got out of Barbie Land for a little bit, I was all on board. And then, honestly, when they got back to Barbie Land, no spoilers, but when they got back to it, I was then able to appreciate Barbie Land more. And I feel like on second viewing, those first 10 minutes I won't really have an issue with. But I will say the humor worked quite well. I really like the messages, the themes. There's a great monologue in this film. No spoilers, but it really worked. And Ryan Gosling, holy cow, he's so good in this film. He really is. And Margot Robbie, of course, is great. And I also love the cast and how each cast member has a moment to shine. But yeah, this is a blast. If you haven't seen Barbie yet, I would highly recommend you watch it because Barbie is a ton of fun. That's why I personally will be giving it a. And next up, we have Joyride. So Joyride, it's funny because I watched Barbie in theaters, and then right after that, I then went straight into my showing of Joyride. This was a film I was greatly looking forward to watching because it is a all Asian cast, and then it's also a R-rated raunchy comedy, and it is also a female led studio film and a comedy one at that. So it has all the writing of something that I should like and I should love, especially because I feel like we don't get this too often. We really don't. Off the top of my mind, I think the last time was what, Girls Trip, and I really liked Girls Trip. And that was a huge surprise for me back in 2017. But unfortunately, Joyride just didn't really work for me. I felt very mixed about this movie. All the things I mentioned about it are all the things that I just wanted more from this. I really did. The humor just didn't really quite work for me. I felt the story was very, very safe. It's a very, very predictable movie, and it follows comedy cliches up the wazoo. Even the third act. The third act has that classic, friends breaking away from friends and then meeting up in the third act and then finally becoming friends, blah, 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 blah. It's a comedy trope that for me, I don't like. And this movie, of course, does that. Again, I think the representation is great. I really do, and I appreciate the fact that this movie has that. And I do hope that more people watch this movie because even though I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie, I hope more people watch it so that way we get more R-rated, women-driven, minority-driven movies. I want that. I really do. Because I feel like, especially with the comedy genre, that's something we don't really get to experience too often. So I want that, but this movie just really isn't that, unfortunately. Now, again, it could just be a me thing because I did see it's the writer from Crazy Rich Asians, and I wasn't too crazy about that movie. But overall, I can see why some people might like Joyride. Again, I really wanted to like this movie a lot, but unfortunately, I felt very, very mixed about this movie, and that's why for me, Joyride, I personally will be giving a. And next up, we have Oppenheimer, which was one of my most anticipated films of the year. That's right. There are a lot of films that came out in July that were on my most anticipated films list of 2023. Crazy. But anyways, Oppenheimer I saw twice in theaters. And I loved it. I honestly loved it even more the second time. It's basically The Social Network meets JFK, two of my favorite biopics of all time. So yeah, I loved it. I think that Christopher Nolan's directing is quite strong. The cast is incredible. The cinematography is to die for. Ludwig Göransson's score, holy cow. Production design. This is a film that it's in the bag in terms of getting several nominations at the Oscars. I can see this film getting at least 10 Oscar nominations. And I'm also going to say that I'm not sure which ones just yet, but I also think that it will pick up some wins. This is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. I'm looking forward to picking this up on 4K, and who knows, maybe I'll watch it a third time in theaters. I don't know yet, but as it is, Oppenheimer, I think it's an incredible experience. I would highly recommend you check it out. The 3 hours runtime for me is very much so warranted, and that's why for me, Oppenheimer, I'll personally be giving a. And next up, we have Talk to Me, which, to be honest with you, I was quite looking forward to because it is an A24 produced film, as well as it is horror, and the premise also seemed quite intriguing. And I gotta say, this is a good film. I've heard some people say it's one of the scariest things they've ever seen. Horror is subjective for sure, similar to comedy, and I will say that I can understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, for me, it really wasn't. I thought that the body horror aspect did quite work, and I do think that it does a good job of getting under your skin in terms of the psychological aspect for the lead character. That was something I appreciated, but I wasn't terrified the way some people were. But I will say this, I think that this is a good film. It is very, very well put together. It has an opening scene that starts right off of, oh, okay, I need to be on my toes. It's a long take. It's really, really good. And I'll also say this, the opening and the ending are probably my two favorite parts about the film. The ending especially, I thought was just perfect. Just perfect. Talk to Me, I can definitely see myself revisiting it because I do think it is good, and I do think that it's effective with what it's going for. The premise, you might have seen it, something along the lines of it in other films. I don't want to say what, but I do think that it does stand out on its own, and I think that for that, it should be celebrated, especially because it is an original film. And yeah, if you like horror, would highly recommend you watch it, especially, and that's why for me, Talk to Me, I personally would be giving a. And next up, we have Sound of Freedom, which I'm going to say right off the bat, if you are looking for a discussion about the discourse surrounding the movie, I'm not going to give you that here. I'm not. I'm talking about the movie itself. And the movie itself is disappointing. It has its heart in the right place for sure. It's delving into themes and messages that are definitely important. And I wanted the movie to be good. I really did. But I just thought the actual execution was very sloppy, especially the editing. There's a couple instances in particular where we'll hear someone say something and then we'll see it and then we'll hear it again. And it's like, okay, just stick with one or the other. And I think that those instances in particular are what really made it stand out for me, that this was a runtime that felt way too long. It's interesting though, because I feel like this movie was both too long, but also too short, because I think given the subject matter, I do think that they should have fleshed it out more so. But I also think that with the fleshing out, I feel like it should have been done by a different director. Honestly, it's funny. I was thinking about it. I was like, if David Fincher directed this movie and this had a better script, I think that this could have been quite good. But as it stands, I just wasn't a big fan of the directing. I thought the writing was very eh. And also at the same time, I think that there are a lot of elements that just had potential. They had the potential. Again, it's based on a true story, and it is something that on paper is intriguing. But again, the execution left a lot to be desired. Now, all this said, despite my disappointment with this movie, I will say that this movie has affected many people and that many people do love this movie. And I get that. I wish that I felt that way. But alas, here we are. Sound of Freedom, I personally will be giving it a... And last but not least, to close out the month, I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. So I got to see an early screening of this. I think it was like, what, 5-6 days early that I got to see it. And this was something that I was curious about, because I like the animation style that they're going for. It's very, into the Spider-Verse, across the Spider-Verse-esque. But also, it's, in terms of the music, it's being composed by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, two of my favorite composers. I think they give incredible work. They usually work with David Fincher. And for those reasons alone, made me want to watch this movie. But I will say this. Unfortunately, this movie... it's written by 5 writers, and I gotta be honest with you guys, it feels like it. Yes, it's very well composed in terms of the score. Yes, the animation style is great. Yes, the voice acting is really good. But I really, really felt like all the writers were on different pages with what they went for. And honestly, the biggest takeaway for me was that what showcased this the most was the fact that the humor felt all over the place. There were some instances, very, very few, that worked for me, but for the most part, it was just a huge flat line. And I'll also say this, the story, characters, the villain, they all just really, really felt one note. And there's also some exposition in this movie that just feels very sloppy. Similar to like Sound of Freedom, you'll have an instance where a character will say something, and then we'll visually see it, and then we'll hear it again. And it's like, just please stick with one of them. Like, you're just adding to the runtime unnecessarily. So, like, we get it. Next. But I get it. Sometimes you have to try to hit home, and I get it that especially with studio-based movies, that's how it is. But unfortunately, it just really stuck out like a sore thumb in some instances with this movie. Now, that being said, similar to like Sound of Freedom, I can understand why some people might like Mutant Mayhem. Totally get that. But for me, I personally was quite on the fence about this movie. I think that I liked some elements, whilst other elements, not so much. And that's why for me, I felt mixed about it. And that's why for me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, I personally will be giving a... Yeah, guys, those are my thoughts briefly on all 12 films that I saw that are 2023 films for the month of July. Let me know your thoughts on any of these movies that you saw. And if you haven't seen any of these, or if you've only seen a couple and you wanted to see certain ones, let me know which ones you wanted to see down below. But yeah, guys, what a month. And I wanted to also say I very much so appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me down Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.